It is 7 o'clock. So why don't we get started? I see that we've got quite a few participants who've already signed in. Welcome everybody to the webinar about Indigenous land, protocols and approaches to the land. My name is Patrick Lucas, and I'm going to be facilitating this evening's discussion with my good friend, Tom Eustache. Tom, give a wave.
Hey.
Hey, there you are. Let's start off with a question to everybody. I'd love to see everyone jump in the chat box and let us know where you're coming in from. Whose territory are you joining us from today? I always love to get a sense of where people are from. So feel free, please throw that into the chat box. Let us know where you're coming from. And also, once you've done that, maybe let us know what organization you're representing. Are you with a mountain bike club? Are you with a recreation group, government, anything like that? Give us, send us a message and let us know where you're coming in from. Starting off, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. This evening's webinar is brought to you by the awesome folks at the Outdoor Recreation Council of BC. ORCBC is a charitable organization with more than 60 organizational members spanning the entire spectrum of outdoor recreation user groups. ORC works to promote and advocate for access to and responsible use of BC's outdoors for public recreation. They build bridges between the different user groups and represent the broad interest of the organized outdoor recreation community to government. As part of that mandate, they develop educational resources, including public webinars, just like this one. And this particular webinar is being supported by the Real Estate Foundation of BC. So thank you very much. Hands up to the Real Estate Foundation of BC. Yay! So the whole idea for tonight was talking about Indigenous protocols when it comes to accessing and being out on the land, and what the steps and actions are taken and how that guides behaviors and relationships with the land. For me, I'm not Indigenous myself, and I've had the honor and privilege of working with Indigenous folks for 15 years, and I've learned a lot about the importance of following protocols, about getting out onto the land. And I think that's something that us as non-Indigenous folks, we need to understand better, and how that guides building relationship with the land. So what we'll do now is we'll get started, and I'll have each of the panelists introduce yourselves a little bit, give us a sense of who you are and what is your relationship with the land in terms of recreation, and then we'll go from there. Why don't we start with Sage Kruger. I've been wanting to do a discussion with Sage for quite some time now, so I'm super excited to have you here with us, Sage. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, everyone. White Haskell Hall in Chai Squeeze Kolomith. Hello, everyone. My name is Sage Kruger. I am a member of the Penticton Indian Band. I am Okanagan and Swampy Cree, and I currently work for Trail Society of BC. I am the Indigenous Engagement Manager, and so I put together walking and hiking tours with Indigenous youth and families. We have an elder or a knowledge keeper join us on these tours, and they talk about the history on the trail, as every trail is different, if that's hunting, gathering, whatever it may be. And I talk about the native plant species and the invasive plant species along those trails. And that's a little bit about me.
Nice. Thank you, Sage. Awesome. So glad to have you here. And I've actually been on some great mountain bike rides with Sage's dad, John Kruger. Absolutely amazing rider. Absolutely love him. Wonderful man. Hopefully, I want to get him on one of these webinars or just out for another ride one of these days. So glad to have you here. Why don't we move on to my wonderful friend who I've been corresponding with for years, but have only had the chance to hang out twice in person. Chelsie McCutcheon, one of my mentors. She's been corresponding with me for years and guiding me and on this journey. And I'm so glad to finally have you joining me on a webinar. So please, Chelsie, tell us all about yourself.
Thank you, Patrick. I am Hati Sesozi Chelsie McCutcheon, Wet'suwet'en from the community of Wet'suwet'en. I currently live on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation and have been living and thriving in the Whistler, Sea to Sky, Squamish Vancouver area as a Indigenous outdoor leader. I'm with the Indigenous Life Sport Academy, formerly known as the First Nations Snowboard Team, which started in 2004. 23 years into the industry, I had connected with the First Nations Snowboard Team as a snowboarder, which has evolved into an 18-year relationship that is still growing. We have expanded beyond snowboarding, and our program facilitates outdoor programs throughout BC, not just within this local area, within snowboarding, mountain biking, rock climbing, hiking. I feel like I'm missing something in there, but outdoor recreation sports for Indigenous youth to find passion and to find wellness through connecting to nature. I personally lead in all of those disciplines, and including teaching yoga. So I'm a disciplined athlete and a mother of two. I have a 15 and 10-year-old, and they're also a part of the outdoor industry. My 15-year-old is getting his certifications in snowboarding and mountain biking in this next year. So it's really exciting to witness multi-generations growing up, being young participants that are now parents and bringing their children. And so this multi-generational healing back on the land, occupying these recreation areas that were too expensive for our community to access, are now barriers are becoming lifted. We're starting to get allies that are recognizing the importance of the relationship building. And thank you so much, Patrick, for all that you dedicate and bridge communities and the accessibility. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us, Chelsie. It's so good to have you here. I've personally been following, particularly like the Indigenous Sport Life Academy, when it was the First Nations Snowboard Team, was a huge source of inspiration for my work. Ended up kind of going in a different direction as an ally, which I think is sometimes what you need to do, but absolutely love everything you guys do and want to learn so much more about it. The last person I wanted to bring into the conversation, last but certainly not least, would be one of my absolutely best friends, someone I've shared a lot of time in trucks with, driving around the province, a lot of time building trail together, Tom Eustache.
Hey everybody, I'm Tom Eustache. I'm from Simpcw First Nation, and we have a territory that spans from north of Kamloops all the way up to Jasper. And I've been lucky enough to be born here and raised here and be able to recreate here. And my family gets out on the land and does stuff like hunting, fishing, everything. We live right by I live in an amazing place. I live right by a creek and a river. So we have access to all that. But most of all, we have access to some amazing trails out the backside of our community, which we've been working on the last, quite a few years. And yeah, people get out and use those trails all the time from our community. And it's been a great, I guess, sort of inspiration for me to keep going and keep building and doing all this stuff. And Chelsie, I only get to ride with Patrick once or twice a year too. So he always says we always ride together. I never see him. So, but yeah, well, that's what we do is we get out on the land and do stuff. We do a lot of planning with Patrick, and we get out. And, yeah, I just love being out there. It's one of the things that I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have the trails. And that's a lot of people in our community are like that too. They just love being out there and being on our trails. And I try to get youth out and riding. It's in our community. It's been busy. It's just with snowboarding and stuff like that, and baseball and stuff. So all the kids are busy doing a lot of stuff, which is really good. But it's been a change in the last few years of people getting out on the trail and just exploring, getting back on land and just looking around at the plants and animals and stuff that are up there. We have bears, deer, cougars, skunks, all kinds of stuff up there. So it's a small area to go into, but there's so much diversity there. So it's pretty cool. It's been a great thing for our community to have that and to get back out in the land. That's been one of the best things I think that's happened for our communities. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you, Tom. So good to have all of you here. So let's get into the topic. So as I was saying before, what I was really hoping to do with this is, in the time that I've had to spend with all my Indigenous friends and colleagues and mentors over the year, they've taught me a lot about what it means to prepare to go out onto the land, to get yourself in the right headspace to be out there, and what that really, really means. And I'm always trying to wrap my head around that. And for the non-Indigenous recreation community, we often think, we're just heading out for a ride. We're just heading out onto the land. And I've come to learn there's a lot. When you want to have those really epic experiences out on the land, when you want to have those great rides, there's a lot of work that goes into getting yourself out there and to being in that right headspace. And when you are in that right headspace, you have an amazing experience. And for the mountain bike community, particularly, that's the community that I'm really part of. We've had to learn that it takes time to build those relationships, to do all the stuff that makes our ability to go out onto the land possible. And so this is about really exploring that and figuring out, what can we learn from our Indigenous friends or Indigenous colleagues who are willing to be here to share their knowledge with us, to make that even deeper, to take that further. And that's what this is really about today. So my first question to the panelists, and my hope is that this can become a question and answer and get into a discussion. I'm watching the question and answer box, so feel free to throw questions in there and I'll bring that into it as we go. I do see that a number of people have jumped in there to say where the territory that they're coming in from. We've got some Secwepemc folks. We've got folks from Musqueam and Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh territories. We've got folks from Quitlam, so all kinds of places. We've got folks who are representing the Shuswap Trail Alliance is here. Wonderful. Good to have you guys in the house. The BC Marine Trails Association. We've got from Splatson. Very cool. Statlium territory. Sunemu here on the island. Wonderful. Oh, we've got the Yacht Club, BC Yacht Club. That's a new one. Awesome. I love it. Very cool. Thank you for joining us. Pemberton Valley Trails Association. Hello, Darren. Good to see so many folks in here. And by all means, for those of you who are just joining us, jump into the Q&A box. Let us know where you're coming in from. Unfortunately, the chat box is still disabled, but feel free to throw it in there. I'll be watching it. So the first question of the panelists. So what I'd love to do is hear from you, among your people in your nation. Can you share with us some examples of cultural protocols that you were taught that guided you when you're going out onto the land? So why don't we start with Sage? I'd love to hear from you on this.
Yeah, for sure. So when I thought of this question, I actually had a story come to mind. And that was when I was a very young girl and I decided to go and play around the house that we grew up in, which had a big, large field in the back. And I was just out wandering about and I came across a beautiful flower. And this is a yellow bell flower. And so they're a beautiful little fairy looking flower. And I got so excited and I picked a whole bunch. And I was so excited, came running in the door and showed my mom and dad, I got you guys flowers. And I thought they were so pretty. And I remember my mom thinking it was so cute and my dad smiling and looking at me sternly and saying, you're not allowed to pick those. And I didn't know at the time that those were on the endangered species list. And so that was a good lesson for me to learn at a very young age, that as beautiful as something is out on the land, that doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do to take it. And so you can smell and enjoy the flowers without having to kill them. And so when it comes to wildlife out on the land, the best thing to do is admire it and to let it flourish, to let it live its life for the wildlife that it's there for, and for it to just continue to have its own ecosystem without us interfering in that. And so I think that's something that's good to be mindful of, is when it comes to harvesting or just being out on the land and enjoying it, you don't need to take what is not yours. And also when it comes to harvesting, only take what is meant for you. And so something that I was also taught was if you're going berry picking, you take amount for yourself and your family, but you're always mindful of the birds that are going to need those berries, or the bears that are going to need those berries, or the other families that are going to go and harvest in that area. So I think that was the one thing that really stood out to me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really powerful. I think that's a really good description of like the kind of relationship that you're learning to have with the land, and always be having that in your mind. Thank you so much for sharing that. How about you, Chelsie? Do you have what kind of cultural protocols have you been taught when you head out onto the land?
Yeah, thanks. It was that was really beautiful, Sage. It shapes my interaction with the outdoors and how I bring others into the outdoors. The mindfulness of within the Wet'suwet'en Nation, we have we're part of a clan system, which has hereditary chiefs in the title of keeping the land. So being stewards of a certain amount of land that is within our nation. And so first of all, it's whose territory are you on? And do you have permission to be on that territory? And how, do you know the sensitive areas within that territory that could be sacred to families, for families to sustain themselves, to respect bears that continue to come onto these trails, into these systems? Where are the sensitive streams? And this is ancient knowledge that has been passed down within the families and within the communities. And visitors coming in may not know about this. So having that awareness piece that each nation has a different governance within the community and also protocols. But ultimately just having this awareness that there are something implemented into the land and into the area. I grew up, thankfully, with a lot of my aunties and a lot of traditional practices, and legends were a part of the practices. And we would learn as little children small things like not spitting on the ground, because there was a belief that there was a witch in the woods. And so if we were to, and stories like that not necessarily were there to scare you, but just to, again, bring that awareness piece that when we come onto the land, that we have that butterfly effect. When we partake and occupy this space, we're going to change it no matter what. And so if I'm spitting on the ground, the story is that the witch in the woods is going to take it and she's going to cast a spell or some sort of curse. And also that you can be in right relationship with the elementals and the other elements and beings that were in the woods by simply respecting and coming in and announcing yourself. So that's introducing yourself to the land. Hello, Hati, Chelsie McCutcheon, part of the Wet'suwet'en, from the community of Wet'suwet'en. And it's opening this door of acknowledgement that you are stepping in as a visitor and you're asking permission. And also that the smallest things like a pine needle is used for medicinal uses. So if I am, as a woman, a part of my flow, menstruation, actually, I would not be touching any of the leaves. I wouldn't be touching any of the shrubs because of that power exchange. So there's really like the smallest things to the biggest things once you come onto territories and land. And it's a sense of awareness and curiosity can always lead you to be in right relationship of your interaction with the outdoors.
Oh, thank you, Chelsie. I think you really echo what I hear from a lot of my Indigenous friends and mentors who've shared with me is the right relations. Really it always comes down to what is the state of our relations before we throw ourselves on a bike and head down the mountain. We're always being reminded to ask ourselves, what is the state of our relations with the land, with each other, with ourselves? And it's always coming back to that base. Well, thank you. That really reminds me of that. Tom, why don't you tell us a little bit? I mean, you've shared with me lots in the past, but maybe you can share with us a bit about what have you learned from your people about when it comes to heading out in land? What are the cultural protocols that you need to be thinking about?
I think it's a lot of similar things to what Chelsie and Sage had talked about, and I think that's respecting the land. Like that's all in a nutshell right there. But also the last thing that you talked about was having a mindset when you get there and thinking about, I'm always telling you that when you get there, forget about all the stuff that is going on in your head right now and think about where you are. And that's a big part of respect, is looking around and seeing where you're at, because sometimes you get so full, and I see it in your face, sometimes you get so full of work and all these things that you're thinking about, and just be here for a minute, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think having that, and that's a huge part of being respectful of where you're at, because then you're able to see all those plants and everything that are there and everything that's wonderful about where you're at. And that's, I think everything else, everybody said everything, that's pretty much what we sort of follow the same protocols of just respecting the land. It was so cool. After our event, our trails are the cleanest place ever. It's so awesome, to have that, and they're always like that. People respect them, and that is one of the things that about respecting where you are and seeing where you're at and keeping things the way they are. Yeah.
And just so everyone who's watching knows what Tom referred to, the event is we recently hosted the first Allies Mountain Bike Festival in Chuchua, which is Tom's community, the Simpcw community, which brought, and Chelsie was there. It was so awesome to have you there. And that was an opportunity to get together and share that kind of experience. And I can attest to what Tom was saying. Every time I go ride with him, he's always, at one point on the ride, he's always stopping me and saying, "Where are you right now? Where's your head at? Where's your head at?" And usually it's because I'm like riding along and I'm not doing very good. I'm kind of stumbling around. And he's always reminding me to be present, be in the moment, because that's why we do all this work. That's why we put in this time, is to be here. And I can't stress enough how important that is. So before we move on again, I just wanted to take notice of some of the folks who are dialing in here. We've got more people here. We've got some folks from Squamish or Squamish territory, from the Garibaldi Park Society, which the person says should probably be called, and I have no idea how to pronounce this, but Nichke, which is Squamish name for Mount Garibaldi. I think that's a great point. We've got folks from Ledley Tenay. Awesome. Up around Prince George. I went to school in Prince George, so that's always important for me. Who else? We got folks from Maple Ridge. Stefan Hui, author of 105 Hikes and Other Books. Good to see you here. We have to do a panel together. So all kinds. We got equestrians, and we got someone from the Comox First Nation, which is where I'm dialing in from, in Courtenay on Vancouver Island. So great to see you here, Mark Harrison. Awesome. So one of the things I really want to ask you guys, and you've already touched on this, but I want to take a bit deeper dive. What can cultural protocols, what can the protocols of your people teach us about caring for the land and each other? So I want to do a bit deeper dive in that. And I can see Chelsie nodding. So let's go to Chelsie. Chelsie, what do you got for us?
Within our culture, and I'm only speaking from my perspective, which is from my family, because within our community, we actually have multiple nations in our one community due to our community members at one point dwindling away. So multiple communities would merge together. So from our perspective and the stories from our families and our protocols, it's really just being able to again, come back to where are you and how can you make things and leave things better. So in terms of protocols that we bring into our programs is doing a introductory of each person. So when we come together as a group, we are so like gung-ho to get onto the trails and, you know, crawl up the mountain so we can get down. And if we take a moment and actually go around in circle like we did at the Allies biking festival, and everybody gave a piece of where they're coming from and who they are and, you know, what their hopes are. And it is also that acknowledgement and entrance piece, this introducing yourself, because you're really not just introducing yourself to the group that is currently there, but you're introducing yourself to generations that have been there previously, because they're still there. They're still holding space for the community, and they're guiding the community in a way of healing. And there's no mistake that each person that comes onto that land is meant to go through there. And when you go in right relationship, when you introduce yourself, you also allow yourself to be a part of the healing, to be a part of this movement of allowing things to grow and to continue to generate for future generations. Another protocol would be being able to recognize each and every person that is a part of that process, and allow them to be a part of this, what is it called again? Like the collective for the community. So there's stories within the nations about everybody's voice matters. Even the little tiny fly, every little voice matters. So having that common respect for all living things. And so that might be something as small as the little flower on the trail.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Chelsie. That was wonderful. And I think there's so many things about what you just said that jumped out at me, but particularly I want to explore this more as we go on, but that piece about healing. One of the most important things I learned is as I've learned better how to work with and aspire to be an ally with First Nation communities and my friends and folks like yourselves and Tom, is if we do it right, there's moments where we can play a role in helping that healing happening, not just in the community, but in our society at large. And that's something I always want to explore more, like how can we facilitate those types of things? And I think that's a key piece about following protocol, is that it becomes reciprocal and it can lead to healing. Sage, what do you think? What can you share with us about what can protocols teach us about caring for each other and the land?
So when I think of protocols, especially based around land, my first thought goes to our Mother Earth, and how our Mother Earth is our home. And just as you would your mother, you take care of her. And just as you would your home, you take care of it. So I think something that is common, where I'm sure everybody here has heard the term, when you go to a campsite, leave it nicer than you found it. And I think that's something that should be taken everywhere in general, is having that thought process of, if you're going for a walk and you see an empty cup, just pick it up and throw it to the nearest garbage, because it's small, it's simple, but it makes an impact. And so that's something that was really ingrained in me at a young age from my monarch of our family. And I would help her clean up our garden every year. And she was always on top of us about making sure that our homes were well kept and clean. And that taught us a lot about not just where you're living, but in any surroundings that is. If your home is dirty, that's gonna affect you mentally. And so I think that just can be taken in so many different terms, but can be brought everywhere. So I think just being mindful of that. And something that my grandma also mentioned was how Indigenous people, we're the original custodians, and we always have been. And so I think when it comes to protocol, it's just a part of being a good human being is cleaning up after yourself and taking care of the Mother Earth, because it's our home, she's our mother, and that's something that I think we all need to take very, very personally and with our hearts, and just in general. I think that's something that we can all do, and it's all something that it's not hard. It's not hard to do. So that's what I think when it comes to protocol and taking care of the land.
Wow. Thank you, Sage. Really powerful. And you know what makes me think of is how, you know, some of the things that you're mentioning, and I'm seeing some folks here in the chat box who are talking about, you know, there's someone here from representing Leave No Trace, Canada, and someone from the Backcountry Horsemen said their motto is Leave No Trace. And I think in a lot of ways, when we stop and we think about it, and this is something I think Tom has really helped me to understand, is even for those of us who are non-Indigenous, we've been taught certain things as well. And sometimes those are dismissed and they're played down, but though we can find our own protocols in that sense, that we can start being mindful of those things as well. Tom, what do you think? Do you have anything to add with that?
I think when you're going into someone else's area too, to respect their protocol and stuff. And if there's something that happens there, we've had this happen in our community that, you know, we planned a big event and everything, and we had a death in the community. So in our community, if there's a death, out of respect, all of anything that you had planned for that week or whatever it takes to take care of that is shut down. So we had to shut down our first Allies event that we were planning because of a death. And it was a tough thing because we did a big planning event and it was huge. And but the day came and I just told Pat and Tom, I said, you know, this is what we have to do. And there's no, you have to have that respect. And out of respect for our whole community, that's the way our community works, is that we respect every family that's there, no matter who they are. And I think that's a huge thing for people from any walks of life to take, you know, to respect everyone. That's a big one. It's a big one for me, you respect all the people in our community and treat them equally. And yeah, so yeah, that's a big one for me that I could think of.
Yeah. Well, and to add to that, just so everybody understands the context. So earlier this spring, Tom here on the call, and our good friend Thomas Schoen from Williams Lake, we had spent months organizing and planning the Allies Mountain Bike Fest. And on the Thursday, so it was supposed to start on Friday, and on the Thursday, we were out in the woods, we were making the last preparations to the new trail that we were going to be opening. And suddenly we heard the church bell in the community tolling, ringing, which means there's been a death in the community. And so we knew something was up, and it turned out it was the chief's brother who had passed away. And one of the key cultural protocols in many First Nation communities that I've worked with, and particularly with the Simpcw, is everything shuts down. Like you just stop, because the community needs the time and the space to grieve. And for me at the time, I understood that on an intellectual level. Like I knew what we had to do, and I remember telling Tom right away, of course. But we were, you know, we'd been working for months on this. So we were kind of stuck in our own mind about, oh no, we have to shut this down. I have to call the sponsors. I have to call this. I have to deal with this. And it was upsetting. We'd worked really long. We thought, oh, we're going to miss this opportunity. And I remember that evening we were all together and we were feeling upset and we weren't really talking very much. And it was the next day, and I saw Tom on the trails, and there was that moment where I realized the most important thing to me was Tom and his community. And I had to put all that ego aside and all that stuff aside and just be there with them. And because we stepped back and we gave the community that room and that space, and we respected that need. Tom, you were telling me that story, how you started doing the cultural protocols around that. And all of a sudden people in your own community started asking, well, when are you going to reschedule? Like, when is the Allies Festival going to happen now? And I remember Tom called me up. It's like, oh crap, now we have to do this. So we reorganized the festival, and I think it actually ended up being so much more powerful because we allowed the community to do what they needed to do, and we respected that. It got us to an even better place. And I think for me, that was, again, having to relearn that lesson again. And that's why protocols are so important, is because you have to keep learning those lessons over and over and over again and being reminded of that. And that was a really powerful lesson for me.
I think too, Patrick, I think like Chelsie was saying, those things happen for a reason, and it happens for a reason. And that's why it happened, because we're set to plan it again. We did it again. And we learned so many things from that as we went forward. And it's always a learning experience if you can sit back and see what's going on. Yeah.
And that's what it means to be aspiring allies, to really, really learn how to go through that and to put your ego and all the things that you think you need aside, and really be there for the community. And so you have to keep learning it over and over again. Tom, you're so patient with me.
And to add to that,
please.
It takes time. And I think as allies or others who are coming in to support Indigenous communities and movements, to know that this is a lifestyle. It's a movement that we're a part of and that we're evolving from. And we're entering into an oral culture. So naturally, with an oral culture where stories and protocols have been handed down through storytelling, songs, that it naturally does evolve as well. And with the death is big in our community, but it's also a revolving door in terms of it's constantly happening. So we're constantly being shut down. We're constantly, and I run a mountain mentorship back in Smithers, where we have 5-day on snow program to get youth out. And between COVID and deaths, we actually were shut down for a couple of years at 99. And I came back in 2021, and it was pushed from month to month to month. And I just had to be patient and sit in a way of being like, okay, no problem. I'll respect that. But suicide and overdose is critical, or it's a crisis, in our community. And so by 2021, within the first 2 months of our of the year, we lost 5 youth under the ages of 29 of suicide and overdose. So the Witsat Mountain Mentorship was actually necessary. So the community called on me because they saw the importance that we were planting seeds in 2019. And they recognized that it allowed the youth to feel empowered and connected to the land. And so by the time I got there in March, we had 9 passings. And so you can understand why this is so critical in terms of getting our youth onto the land so they can feel connected and feel a sense of belonging. And out of the 24 youth that we connected with and got out onto the land, we lost 1 2 months after our mountain mentorship. And it's just respecting absolutely that the community shuts down, but then also when it's time to come, that we're ready.
Yeah. That's a really powerful message right there. Like, you step back, you give that space. And then the most powerful thing is that I think what made me realize is that Tom felt comfortable enough with me and with our friend Thomas, that he was able to come to us when they were ready to move forward. They felt comfortable coming to us to do that. I think that's a very powerful indicator that we're doing something right, Tom? Okay, so we do have Jay back on. He's called in this time. Jay, let's try your audio.
We'll try again. How's this?
Hey!
Can everybody hear me?
Excellent.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes,
Holy
we can hear you. Holy smokes.
If there's
awesome.
ever a reason to buy a new computer, this is it.
Awesome. So good. So Jay, what we're talking about is, what are the most important lessons that, you've gained from following cultural protocols and sharing that with others?
Ooh.
Easy question.
Yeah. Wow. Right. No banner on the bush.
We've been on for 45 minutes, man.
Yeah, I guess so. Most important protocols, I think, kind of going back to just where I started and where I'm learning, was bring an offering of something. So I live in the Kamloops desert. We all carry water. One of the first things I do is I go just go over to a bush or a plant, and I give thanks, and I give some water to that plant and to the ground and to the earth and to all the ancestors that are around, and just thank them for allowing me to be there that day and to be on the land. And when we do that, our connection becomes even more so. We're already out there, we're already tromping around, we're already in nature, but to be able to give that thanks and that appreciation for the ancestors, for Mother Earth, for the territory that we're in, is just an amazing way to start and do things in a good way.
Wow, that's awesome, Jay. Thank you. That's a really important reminder. Yeah, that means a lot. And I think that leads really well into the next question I wanted to ask. And Sage, I'd love to hear from you on this. I know you've been doing a lot of work around with youth and trails. And I'm wondering, what are some of the key lessons that you try to share with the youth when you're going out on the land? What is it that you really want them to know?
So I think with that one, it kind of brings me back to what I was saying about cleaning up after yourself, and how my grandmother taught me very young to clean up after yourself in any surrounding. And so I actually did a tour in the summer with some youth from the Penticton Indian Band. And I brought some healthy snacks and some juice boxes and just the things that kids will want to have on a little walk. And so I brought some carrot sticks, and my nephew joined us, and he had his juice box, and he was eating those carrots, and I noticed he was spitting out the butts. And then he's just a young boy frolicking around on the trail, and he dropped his juice box a couple times, and I had to give him the anti-stern talking to. And I said, we clean up after ourselves. You don't need to leave your butts around, your little carrot butts. It's perfectly fine to put them in your pocket. There's nothing wrong with those sitting in your pocket, and to not have your juice box be flying about, and you're out playing and you forget about it and you leave it there. And so that was something that I was vocalizing very much to these youth, because especially at a young age, when you have this being told to them, that's when they're really going to absorb that and learn from it. And our intention is for them to take that and hold that with them throughout their life for the next generations. And so I think a huge one for the youth is just learning to clean up after yourself and your environment and your surroundings. And again, it's all connected. So your home, your community, your surroundings. I was a part of our band's youth group, and we would do, I think it was at least about twice a year, the youth group would all get together and go out onto our reserve, and we would do big cleanups together. And our band would do this was 10 years ago or longer. So back then we had like CDs. You would win a prize if you had the biggest garbage bag, or like a $20 gift card to Walmart. So something where it was like kind of interactive, where the youth felt rewarded after doing that. And to, you know, families, if it's a mom talking to her kids, you know, give them a little treat, some strawberries, something healthy, something to make them smile and feel good and feel appreciated for doing that. Because again, it's the small things that make such a big impact. So I think that for sure is a big one, and just having fun with them, because laughter is medicine, and those kids will feel rewarded and they will feel good about it, and they will continue to do that. So yeah, that's what I could say from my reserve, from my nation. And I think that can be applied in a lot of different bands and nations as well, and everyday people. So
awesome. Thank you so much, Sage. I think that's really poignant. Thank you. I want to go back to Jay, because Jay, we know we didn't get you for the first half of this. So what and you work with youth as well. And I think you've been doing a number of things with youth programming, as at Sun Peaks or Harper in Kamloops. What are some of the lessons beyond shredding on their bikes do you like to impart with the youth that you take out?
Yeah, following exactly pretty much what Sage said. Leave, one of the easiest way to say it is leave it better than you found it. That's one thing that I think has been a part of our Indigenous culture and history for so long. That's why it's so hard to find archaeological evidence of us. You know, we've been on this land as caretakers forever. And in a few hundred years, look at where we're at, right? It's totally different than how it was and how it ever will be again. As simple as picking up an extra piece of garbage in the parking lots, making sure that you're not disturbing things around. You know, there's so many things that have been given to us, and we just need to help our earth and everything that we have to be able to live and to grow in a good kind, gentle way. We need to treat it in the same fashion. When I take youth up to Sun Peaks or whatever, the first thing we do as a group is we gather together and we just do exactly what I do when I'm out there on my own. I take them over to something and I say, we're going to give thanks, or we're going to offer something to the land for allowing us to be here, for taking care of us so that we have a safe trip, we have a safe ride, we have a safe day on our snowboards, whatever it looks like. And then always try to get them to think about what it looked like when they came and what it'll look like after they leave. You know, we don't inherit the land from our forefathers, we borrow it from our children. And if we don't leave our children a good space, then what do you leave them? You know, think about it in that way. I think is a good way.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. And we can hear you perfectly now.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no, you're coming through crystal clear.
You want to hear all my jokes from earlier?
Well, we'll get to that. I mean, you can just start peppering them in. It's all good. I think one thing that I remember, I went for a ride with you, Jay, a while ago, and this is something that happens whenever I'm riding with Tom as well, and his nephew Leon, and other Indigenous folks that I've met. But what I always love is when we were out riding together once in Merritt, and every time we stopped, you'd point something out on the trail and be like, oh, you know what, you can use this plant over here. This is what this plant is called, and you can use it for this. And you were such a fountain of energy, information on that. But later on, like as I thought about it over the years, I came to realize like how important that was to situating ourselves on the trail. You know, it wasn't just gather at the beginning and think about this. It was, and Tom, as Tom said before, he's always like asking me halfway the trails, like, where's your head at? Like, where are you at? Like, are you present or not? Always being reminded to be present and really take that experience in. Because I think so much of what we do, we end up getting worried about our Strava time or whatever it is, you know, hitting that gnarly jump next. You know, it's always about kind of bringing ourselves back and being in that space. How about Tom? What do you think? Do you have anything to add to that? What do you take your kids out for rides all the time? What do you really want them to know as you have them out there on the land?
I think just a overall big thing with me is just saying, look, when we get somewhere, like if me and Ari and Theo get up to the top of the trail, we're walking, we stop, and I'll say, look where we are. How many other people get to do this today? Appreciate where we are. Really appreciate where we are, because, you know, not a lot of people get to experience this stuff, and they do. They appreciate it so much that, you know, some days they don't want to come home. It's pretty cool. We all stay up there until dark on some days. If we're just trail building or if we're just exploring, you know, they want to stay up there till dark. And it's just that appreciation of where they are, and they take it in. It's not, oh man, we're going to have to hike up here. They're experiencing it fully. Like, it's just, and if we can take that lesson from children to be able to experience that, have that experience when we go out and have that appreciation, I think that's a huge one. I think it would go a long ways, because we always get caught up in our own heads of what we do. That's where I go to get out of my head and get just, you know, be calm. It's an amazing place. So, yeah.
And I can attest that lesson is getting through, because last time we were out riding and we were with Arya, and Arya is Tom's daughter. She's 8 now. Yeah, I think she's 8, and we're up at the top of the hill. And I was sitting there talking away, doing this, that. And she's like, hey, Patrick, look at where we are. Just appreciate. I was like, oh my God, your tubs. Oh God. So I just want to remind everybody, if you have questions for our panelists, please start throwing them in the chat box. And there's a few that have jumped up here that I thought was interesting. We got one from Mark Vevoda. I hope I'm saying your name right. I apologize if I'm not. And he asked, is there any special considerations that people have when they're out clearing trails? So, you know, they're removing deadfall, they're doing work on a trail, right? And this is something so many of us can appreciate, whether, you know, you're in the mountain bike community or you're in the equestrian community, the hiking community, you're going out to work on a trail. Are there any considerations that they should be taking into account? Chelsie, you've been so quiet and patient. I can see you kind of wanting to get in the conversation. So please, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I would hope that trail builders will be communing with the local communities, with the First Peoples of the community, to see what is sensitive within the area. So that would be relationship building. Really, to relationship build, from my experience and for many other people that come into Indigenous community, is that we're on a knock on a door basis. You need to be courageous enough and vulnerable enough to go and knock on a community's door or in a program and just show up and be a part of it. And through that, you'll start to learn what is sensitive, what is not, what's appropriate. And if you end up stepping on, other people's territory in not a right relationship, and they come to you, and sometimes that could be in a heated manner, because at one point, these places were taken away in a way that we were no longer able to practice this in a public setting. So a lot of these practices were underground, still stayed alive, but it took a lot of perseverance for this culture to continue and to still be alive today. So there's a lot of emotion that goes around that, and to really just accept your ignorance, essentially, because you don't know until you know. And if you're called out, you make it right. make it right by working with the community as best as possible.
I think all of that is so important. And I think the one thing that caught me there, and I get this a lot, people ask, will reach out to me because they do want to start taking those steps. And often people say the first thing they say is, I'm concerned about making a mistake. I'm concerned about doing something wrong. I'm concerned about offending someone. And typically my answer is, you will. You will. Those things will all happen. The worst is the folks who either don't care or are so arrogant that it doesn't matter to them if they make offense. But after that, it's the folks who just kind of disappear. It's being willing to be open, to learn, to take accountability, and to show that you're willing to take those steps. And I think, Tom, I'm sure you can attest to this. Like, I just keep coming back. You're like, yeah. But I was always willing to be like, I made a mistake. Like, let me, and willing to show that I was willing to learn from that. And that's the most important thing, I think, is having that humility, having that sense that you're there to learn and to show that you're willing to learn and be accountable for the mistakes that you made. I think it's really important. Here's another great question. There's two really good questions that just came up. One said, what are some, and this is from an anonymous attendee, what are some important things that outdoor recreation organizations can do to respect and support Indigenous land protocols? Why don't we start with Tom? What do you think? Why don't you jump in there?
I think, like we were saying, get to know where you're at and whose First Nations you're on. And try to get to know the people there and what their protocols are. Like for our valley here, I think we've gotten the message out really well to what our protocols are. So I think getting to know those people and be patient, because knock on a door, you might have to knock a long time before somebody opens it. But even for us, we try, and we have a hard time with capacity, and sometimes we just don't have the capacity to do this stuff, especially in the summertime, where if you're looking for a monitor to come and monitor your trail building, you better let me know right now what you're going to be doing next summer, because all of our people are going to be busy then. So and that's the way we do it in our territory, is that we try to get a monitor on anything that we're doing, logging, mining, whatever it happens to be. We're going to have someone there making sure that you're not disturbing some of our stuff that has been there for years and years, that it's been hidden there, and you might dig it up and we don't know about it. So yeah, that's just one of the things that we do. So.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Tom. How about Sage? What do you think? Like, what do you think and I know I worked with your community in the past on a trails of recreation project, and there's a lot going on with the Penticton Indian Band in terms of people coming onto the reserve and causing damage. And I know that there's some groups who are trying to reach out and fix that. What would you say to non-Indigenous recreation oriented organizations? What can they do to respect protocols or build relationships? What would you say to them?
I think, as Tom was mentioning, is building those relations. So if that's trying to get a hold of chief and council, or really any department that you're trying to get a hold of from the community. And when you're talking about getting out onto the land, I think we've all touched on the importance of respect, because all of our nations through all of Canada are very different. But the one thing that we all really hold deeply and that we all connect on is respect, and how important that is to each nation, and how that's always where we're starting off. We're always, 300 years ago, we had relations with all these nations, and all these trails that are being used, they were our trails that we that we got from one nation to another, trading, whatever that was. And it was all based around respect. So I think if that's your intent, you're already starting off on a good foot. And to go back to some of the questions that were asked about being nervous and being scared of saying the wrong thing, as Patrick, you've said, that's going to happen. And it's okay that that's going to happen because, like Chelsie was saying, if you don't ask, you won't know. So I think having the courage to ask those questions, I think if that's where you're starting in the right place. So hopefully that was somewhat of an answer that resonated with you.
I think so. I've been getting a lot of hearts and thumbs up floating past the screen here. So we're doing something right. Jay, what do you think? Would you add anything to that?
I think I can just mirror what everybody says, that respect of the nation that you're in. You know, if you're a trail builder, and not even like a non-sanctioned trail builder, but if you're off Rogue doing something somewhere and you're working along and you are realizing that maybe your trail flow is going toward like through, say, the terrain all of a sudden changes. All of a sudden you're finding rocks that are all of very similar size that seem out of place. Just stop. You might be going through a burial ground or a ceremony ground that hasn't been used in who knows how long. I forget who was saying, it might have been Chelsie was talking about, well, actually everybody said about how our things went underground. They disappeared because it was illegal for us to be. And if as a trail builder, you're out and you come across something like this, you might have just helped us as a First Nation gather some of our history and some of our ceremonies back. And this is where working with the people, knowing what's out there, knowing what's in the land, knowing maybe kind of things that you're looking for, and that respect of being able to be like, whoa, okay, yeah, this was going to be a sick trail, but obviously something has changed here, and I need to do something.
Yeah, I think you touch on something really important there, Jane, and that's another key lesson that I learned, particularly working with Tom, is that if, as non-Indigenous folks, if we work with communities long enough and we listen carefully enough, there's often ways that we can learn that we can actually really become allies because we're helping the community assert their rights and title. You know, we're not just about trying to gain access and do our thing and be out on the trails, but, you know, like working with Tom and his community, I learned that the trails that we built together, people in his community started using the trails as part of their healing journey. You know, we've been out on trail projects and we've discovered those archaeological areas, and we shut things down and brought in the community, and, you know, we figured out we could reroute the trail and protect that area. So now, rather than just being someone out there who's doing something on their land and taking up space, now we're helping them to assert their rights and title, to reconnect to their land. We're helping create that platform on which they're furthering their healing journey. That's so important. And the other thing I wanted to connect on is what you've all sort of said. And I think for folks who, non-Indigenous folks who are listening and who want to understand like how to engage with communities, I always tell a story, and I always say that every First Nation community I've ever worked with has what I call their stack of wood. And what it is I was working in a small community in the Caribou, one of the Chilcotin communities, and I was there for a long time, and I was trying to build a relationship with the community. And, you know, you go into the band office and sometimes they just kind of leave you sitting there for long periods of time because they're not really sure who you are. And they're like, who's this guy? What's he want? And I was going back to this community over and over and over again. And I realized just sitting there and watching that everybody who came in the door, this little office was in the basement of this old wood building. And everybody who came in the office, they would grab a piece of wood from outside because this was winter time, and they would come in and they would set it on the floor in a little stack of wood next to the wood stove. Every single person who came and did that. So the next day I came back, when I came in, I grabbed a stick of wood, I walked in and I put it down next to the fireplace. And that changed everything for me. Suddenly the secretary was talking to me. Everybody started opening up to me. And I realized I was showing them that I was willing to wait, to listen, to watch, and then to participate in what they were doing to keep their community working. I was willing to play my little part. So whatever community you're working with, you know, you show up for Indigenous Peoples Day, you show up for their events, and you watch and you look for their stack of wood. You find that and you participate in that. That can be really powerful. Okay, so we're at 8:10. Let's see if there's any more questions. What advice would you give to start the conversation around land recognition protocols within an organization and its members from a conservative background? Okay, so I'm thinking, like, you know, you're working with a non-Indigenous group, and every club deals with this. You know, you have a board of a club who wants to move the needle forward on reconciliation. How do you have that conversation with your membership to help them understand why this is important? Jay, you work with the Kamloops Bike Riders Association. Maybe you could help us understand this a little bit. Like, how do you have a conversation with the organization and the membership that might not be quite on board yet? How do you help them understand how to move this forward?
Really stress the importance of respect and connection. If you respect me enough to listen to me or hear what I'm saying, you're going to have the respect enough to be able to follow what I'm saying. So if we're saying you need to go connect with somebody about doing work in the bike ranch, well, you go to the KPCC or somebody like that and be like, hey, I want to go in and, you know, help on a trail day or something. It's the same thing if you're doing trail building out on the land. Connect with somebody. If you have a community that isn't maybe quite at that level yet, I'm not even sure how to, I don't know, force them into it. But I don't know, how do you do that? How do you bring somebody in who isn't ready to have that conversation yet? Just wait, I guess, until they're ready, or it might not happen, which is unfortunate, but
that's a tough one. Tom, I want to ask, I see you there, Chelsie. I'll come back to you on. Tom, I wanted to ask you, like, Simpcw is a very strong leadership community in your territory. You know, you're asserting your rights and title throughout your territories and bringing a lot of people on board, bringing in a lot of allies. How would you answer that question? What advice would you give?
You just have to keep knocking on that door and finding someone there that you can talk to. Because if you don't, you're never going to have that relationship. And sometimes it probably is frustrating. Even with our community and the way we run things are pretty slow sometimes because of the massive amount of stuff that we are involved in. And so be patient, find someone. There's people that go through me to get to other people. And I think it's really important. And one of the things I think on our side that I always try to take to heart is be accountable. So I want to be accountable too to someone else that's doing stuff. So I try to be accountable on my side and get the stuff to where it needs to be. So that's just being two sides being accountable to each other. I think that's the way it has to be. And with me, that's what I do. I can be the liaison to people and, you know, make things work, but other communities might not be like that, but keep trying to find a way there. Try to meet someone there for sure. Because You need to be involved in that and find out who they are. That's the big part of it, is finding out who these people are. And yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Chelsie, what do you think? How would someone who's working for a non-Indigenous organization, maybe has some conservative members, and that, I mean, yeah, that can be a broad range of folks with different ideological backgrounds, who have reservations about how to move forward or what this all means. How do you help them move that needle?
Hire Bob Joseph, part of the Indigenous Corporate Training Inc. He's also written 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indigenous Act and Indigenous Relations Insights, Tips, and Suggestions. He's a great speaker, and you invite a community member of the nation that you're servicing or occupying, and have a facilitator come in and explain. He's great. He's fantastic. Bob Joseph, if you don't know him, you could Google him and find him really easily. And even if you don't hire him, you can buy 21 Things You Don't Know About the Indian Act to kind of broaden your aspect of why is it important to connect with Indigenous people, the first people of the land. And that would be a really great way to start for yourself as an advocate.
Right. Yeah, I can't say enough good things about Bob Joseph. He's been a huge source of inspiration for me. He did a blog post about the Indigenous Youth Mountain Bike program just when we started, and it just meant so much. I was like so scared when I was talking to him on the phone. I was like,
and also to support the champions within the community. So if you see some like an Indigenous person, it doesn't matter how old they are, if they're younger or older, I'm summoning miracles just to show up at all times. So when I gain that support from another, person or group, it just helps for that showing up aspect. So when you step in as a business or leadership, or you are guiding business, and you show that interest to the champions within the community, you start to learn and build those relationships.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Chelsie. How about you, Sage? Do you have anything to add?
I think the thing that I would add is kind of just repeating what Tom has talked about, being consistent with knocking on that door, because all of our nations are all busy with something different, but same at the same time. So if that's addictions in our community, that's housing in our community. All of our communities are all dealing with a lot of different things, but as I mentioned, the same kinds of things. And so sometimes our chief and council are not able to have the time to listen to organizations, but there are those days where you can call them and you can get through. And I think it's the importance of just continuing to knock on that door. And I think, Patrick, you're a great example of that, because I think it seems like you are where you are because you have never stopped. And I think a lot of organizations and allies can learn from that. It's a slow process, but patience is a virtue. And so I think that's a really important thing. And if you're scared to ask those questions too, there's other resources, like Chelsie was just saying, that there's so much books, and if you are trying to learn more about the community that you're living in or you're trying to connect with, it's a simple Google click away in today's world. So there's where I live, I'm currently living in Kelowna. There's a museum that's just across the bridge in West Bank. In Eustache, there's Inkamip. If you want to learn more about different nations throughout all of Canada, they're put on APTN. there's Say Magazine, there's Indigenous, there's so many different outlets and platforms where if you're nervous to have that conversation, do the research yourself. You know, you can educate yourself in many different ways with all of the technology and resources we have now. So I think if you're nervous, that's a great place to start. And again, just continuing those emails, continuing knocking on that door, you will get through. So, yeah.
Yeah, so good, Sage. Thank you so much. Thank you for your kind words. And I think that's one thing I often, when I'm talking to clubs, is, you know, it really is about understanding you're playing a long game. You know, I've been doing this in this particular iteration, the Indigenous Mountain Bike program, for 10 years. I've been working with First Nations for 15 years. And I've been involved in around and interacting with First Nations since I was a kid. So and you're just always plugging away at it, and you just have to stay committed. But particularly to answer that question about, you know, for the person who was asking about how to get those conversations going within your, you know, a non-Indigenous organization with folks who might not be there yet, I always try, and this was something Tom said to me once, is like, he was listening to me rant one day. Right, Tom? One day, right, Tom? There's only one day. He's like, look, you know, you haven't always been so woke, you know, like you've been on a journey. You need to go talk to your community and bring those people on that journey with you. And that made me really think back. So whenever I'm talking to those organizations, I think back to where I was, you know, a few years ago and struggling with these issues. And I'm always struggling and trying to wrap my head around, you know, now for me, I'm trying to figure out, like, land back. Like, what does that really mean? What does it really mean to decolonize? Like, you know, and struggling with those own questions in my head. So I try to meet people when I do talk to, because I sometimes talk to groups myself, I try to meet people where they are and try and, you know, bring up examples that I think will be meaningful to them. Because a lot of folks within conservation groups or recreation groups, they have, you know, a relationship with the land. They care about being out on the land. So the example I used earlier about, like, we learn protocols ourselves. So, you know, something like leave no trace, leave the land better than when you found it. You know, so it'd be like, I would say to them, it's like, well, imagine learning protocols from people who've been here for 10,000 years. Like, we can learn more. And it's about kind of finding those things and helping people move forward. So the last question I wanted to ask, we're winding up here, guys. This has been amazing. A couple of people have asked in the chat box about cultural appropriation, because they want to, you know, where they want to understand how they can talk to students about this, how they can talk to their own membership about this without it becoming performative or appropriating cultural practices that are not their own. So I'm wondering if maybe we have some advice to them about how to move forward with that way. What is a good way to talk about cultural protocols without overstepping those bounds? And, you know, understanding that you probably don't know enough about cultural protocols to really start practicing them in that way. So Chelsie, I'd love to start with you on this one. We're going to do one final round and then we're going to wrap up. What do you think? What would be your advice on that?
That's a fully loaded question. First of all, that we're all still learning, including Indigenous people. We're really just learning, because I was an Indian and then Native and now Indigenous or First of People. So we're really actually just starting to learn announcing ourselves here in the community and in a public setting. And it really would be invite somebody that is from the community. So then you can get that feedback right away and invite people a part of the program. And you know what? You might not get anybody showing up for a couple of years, but that door is open and that conversation is with the people that are first of that land. Another one is the way we talk as recreational outdoor enthusiasts. We often use where we recreate as words such as playground. Actually, it was sacred grounds to other people. So maybe we need to start dropping those type of words. Stewards of the land. The stewards of the land are the people first of that land. So we are allies. We are a part of this movement to support the stewards of the land. And maybe some communities may not bring in the word unceded, which means stolen land. My aunties took me aside and they said, actually, my girl, we don't say we are part of the unceded traditional territory of the Wet'suwet'en, because nothing has been stolen. We are stewards and caretakers of the land. So just say we're part of the traditional territory of the Wet'suwet'en. And so it's having that constant awareness piece. We also bring it in when we say, bring in your own tribe, right? Kind of not culturally appropriate for some people. Or so just be aware. And also that you'll make mistakes and we're learning together.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsie. Great message. Really, we're learning together. And yeah, can't stress that enough. Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, I think like Chelsie was saying, come and learn with us. Like come to our events, come and check it out. Every time I take things for granted where I live and our protocols for granted, or things that I know for granted. I never think of it. I never think of it as something that's, I don't know, been ingrained in me since I was little. My parents taught me. So I'm not used to sharing that stuff with people. So little bits and stuff come out when we sit around and chat, me and you, Thomas, or whoever happens to be there. We're chatting about this stuff. Things come out, and there's something new that you could learn, and that's the way it happens with us. We you're learning, and I'm learning something new every time we meet, and every time we do something together. So I think that's very important to be able to try to meet face to face, and because it's not the same of us sitting here looking at each other on a screen. It's not the same as me texting you or answering an email. And, I might not answer your email.
Maybe not. No.
Yeah. So, that's a huge thing. I think we've gotten away from that. And that's one of our protocols, is meeting face to face and talking to each other. And that's who we are as First Nations people. We want to see your face and be in front of you and talk to you. And that's how we get business done most of the time. Like you said, at the beginning of our meeting, introduce yourself, who you are and where you're from, who your family, if it's us meeting together, it's who your family are, and and who you're related to and all that kind of stuff. So that's really important to us. And like I said, it's just something that I always do, and we never think about it, but it's very important. So if you want to be able to know that kind of thing, you have to come to one of our events, come and meet somebody. Like I'm always trying to get out and meeting the people that are doing this stuff in our valley, and go and see because I'm always interested to see what they're building, really. But I want to go meet with them, and so that they know who we are. I think that's a huge thing. That's a huge thing for me. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. As always. Sage, what do you think? What would you add to that?
I think if we go back to that comment about students and teachers, I think something that I was very lucky to have really great teachers who were interested and very mindful of how they went about conversations with First Nations people and the history about that, is being vulnerable enough to know that your student who is Indigenous will probably know more than you. And that's okay to allow that student to speak on what they want to share. And if they don't want to share anything, then be respectful of that as well. I also think when it comes to having a First Nation person come in the classroom, I think that is super beneficial. If you're able to get an elder, that's when you can hear really great stories being told, really great knowledge. As I mentioned, if you're doing outreach to communities, all of our bands operate differently, but majority will have a family programming department, Some bands have elders meetings, so you can reach out and ask if any of the elders would be comfortable with doing something like that. So again, it's just the reaching out. I think if you're consistent with that and respectful, then someone will come forward, because there are a lot of storytellers from our nations, from our bands, that want these stories to be told. So I think that is a great way to build those relationships. And then when it comes to appropriation, I think a great way to be a supportive ally is if you want to get Indigenous jewelry, make sure you're getting it from an actual Indigenous person. Here in BC, if you go to some of the gas stations, you can see they're actually owned by some of the families from those reserves. So that's supporting those nations, those bands. So I think making sure that you're doing your research, that it's like actual real people from these communities, and it's not something that's mass produced that you bought at a Walmart or some big brand name. I think that is hugely important. And if you want to really support us, that's how you can actually do that. So again, you can find that online. You know, like I mentioned, APTN, Say Magazine, they're always promoting Indigenous artists, Indigenous people, and that's how you can really support us.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Sage. Jay, final word goes to you, my friend.
Well, just like everybody else said, connect with connect with somebody. If you're a teacher and you're worried about cultural appropriation and teaching protocols and land use and ceremony and all that kind of stuff, well, that is total cultural appropriation if you're taking teachings that aren't yours to share, I guess. Now, what I mean by that is what we talked about here today, that's to share. So if you're a teacher in a high school and you're about to take the students out for a little walk around the school or something, even just to show them plants around, I think it's okay to be able to bring an offering or water or something like that and give thanks in that way. If you want to move into harvesting, if you want to move into any other land use kind of things, I think that's where connecting with either the local First Nation or somebody that can help you and guide you in that way. And that's where reaching out, making these connections happen. So here, right now, you have 4 awesome Indigenous people that are able to help, that, might be able to answer a question. We might not be able to answer specifically to that specific territory, but we might be able to guide you to somebody that can. Or Google. Google's a wonderful tool. Find out what land you're on. Find out where you are. Who walked here long before you did. But as far as if you're just showing respect, that is probably just all that we can ask for.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jay. Okay, so that brings us to an end, guys. We've run over time a little bit. So thank you so much, all of you, for sharing your knowledge and your stories. I think these conversations are just so critically important. I really appreciate you sharing your time with us tonight. Thank you, everybody who signed in and shared this evening with us. This panel has been recorded, and it'll go up on the ORC website and YouTube, and we'll make sure we get out to everybody. To a panelist, any final comments or questions before we, Chelsie, you look like you got something there.
I think in terms of cultural appropriation and bringing in knowledge keepers or community members to enhance your knowledge as a group or, as a collective of people, to honor the time. So often as Indigenous people, we are constantly asked to lead and to teach and to enhance this knowledge. I can't go to the grocery store without being asked what is culturally appropriate. And I'm like, dude, I'm just getting some eggs. Like, I would like to just be a human right now. Is to acknowledge and add it to the budget and understand that there's an energy exchange, because we're getting invited to so many things and we would absolutely love to show up, but we also have families and time is valuable. And if you wish to invite an elder or a champion or a leader to that, there is some sort of energy exchange, and know that we would love to volunteer, but we also can't eat off of volunteering. And so just have that awareness piece as well.
Awesome. And I think that's a perfect spot then. And unless there's any final comments, no? Okay. So as I said, this recording will be up on YouTube and on the ORC website. Make sure you look for it, tell your friends, share it around as much as you can. We are trying to organize a couple more webinar episodes, hopefully in December. Please keep a lookout for that. Thanks again to the Outdoor Recreation Council for bringing this together, making happen, and for the support from the Real Estate Foundation of BC. Gayla Kessler from here in Comox. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Thank you so much.
Lim Lim, thank you. Tinigi.
Ms. Saikyo, thank you so much for inviting me.
Coach Jam, thank you.
All right. Week 10. All right. Good night, everybody.